Emerald Towers is probably the most important piece of writing that I've ever made that would help me in a court of law if I ever had to. Well, I've actually been in court with Loree McBride, and she lost her case simply because Terrence Jenkins executed the jurors. That was, and you can find out all about that in Jesus, the Eternal Bridegroom. But Emerald Towers depicts my relationship with Brent Spiner from 1990 to 2000. I wrote it in 2000. When I wrote Emerald Towers, I had just figured out that Loree McBride was a Vatican agent. And this story is how I figured that out. You see, Brent did talk to me on the phone in 1991, 92, and 93. And then the Vatican was able to cut it off using Loree McBride. They inserted her into our relationship, and her job was to break us up. And this short story basically goes into my heart and soul as I was in the 1990s. And I kept my relationship with Brent a big secret because I was married at the time, and I was struggling with the morality of being in love with Brent while I was married to my emotionally abusive husband. And I actually, when Brent spoke to me on the phone, I can remember with clarity, even to this day, what he sounded like, the yearning that he had in his voice. And I actually studied some acting to make a movie called Brent Spiner's Rape. And I'm using my acting skills to help me as a audiobook narrator. And I consider this reading of Emerald Towers my best performance yet. I really got into the soul of Brent Spiner as he spoke to me. In other words, if you listen to the audio narration, you will hear exactly the tone of voice that Brent Spiner used when he spoke to me on the phone in 1991. I captured it to perfection in this reading. And even though this is a short audiobook, it is I spent 3 months writing this short story. 3 months. Every word I think I prayed over. The reason I started writing is because back in when God told me in December 1999 that Loree McBride was a Vatican agent, that was when I had just come back from a mammogram, a meeting with my doctor about a mammogram that I had done on my breasts. And he said, I'm not trying to scare you, but there's a possibility that you may have breast cancer. And he said, we need you to do a biopsy, I think he said a needle-guided biopsy under general anesthesia to just make sure. He said, we don't want to take any chances, just to make sure that you do not have breast cancer. And I had been through so much at this time. I had already had my neck damaged by a naturopath doctor who had turned out to be a Vatican agent, and she tricked me and damaged my neck, and she was trying to induce psychotic symptoms in me. And at this point in my life, I was really, really leery about doctors because and then I went to a chiropractor after her to try to fix what she did, and he made it worse. And I found out the Vatican got him too. And my neck was terrible. I was getting 3 hours of sleep, and my neck muscles were in a spasm. Whereas before I went to see this naturopath, I was sleeping like a baby. I was sleeping beautiful. So at this time in my life, I had just gotten off of my psychiatric medications, and apparently the Vatican didn't like that. And so they used these doctors to try to induce psychosis in me by giving me insomnia. And I could tell that the way they had damaged my neck, I was feeling like like psychosis symptoms coming on. It was because of the damage to my neck. And Brent was on my phone at this time. He had a wiretap on my phone, and I was telling him on the phone everything that was happening to me. So all this was happening to me, and I had just found a good chiropractor who was fixing my neck, and I believe that Brent was working with this guy to try to fix what the Jesuits had done to me. And at that time, I thought, oh no, now they're going to now they're going to do something to me in general anesthesia. So I told the doctor, I said, I refuse. I was more scared of what they would do to me in general anesthesia than I was of breast cancer. I said, I refuse the biopsy. I will not do, I am not going to go under general anesthesia unless you can do it local. He said, well, it has to be general. I said, why does it have to be general anesthesia? So I was about to refuse the biopsy. I went to God in prayer, and I said, what is going on? Why does it seem like the whole world is trying to sabotage my health and try to make me appear crazy? Because I know that Brent Spiner spoke to me in 1990 and 1991, and I know it was him, and they're trying to make me, and now you have just told me that Loree McBride's a Vatican agent. I got Jack Chick's books, and I read up on the Vatican. I thought, oh my God. Anyways, this short story goes into how I figured out she was a Vatican agent. It was mostly through circumstantial evidence, which was very strong. And then I put two and two together. This book goes into how I figured it out. I mean, this little short story. This may be a short story, but if I was in a court of law, this short story would be very strong circumstantial evidence that Brent and I have a legit relationship and that Loree is a Vatican agent. Now, what's really interesting is that Loree McBride claims she married Brent Spiner in 2001. I wrote this short story in 2000. Okay? And Brent Spiner was on my phone. I know that for a fact. And anyways, this is very strong. And he spoke to me on my phone several times. In fact, one time in 1993, he called me up and made love to me on the phone. This was after my son had been in the hospital for a couple of weeks for pneumonia and asthma. And Brent would call me up and claim that he had wrong numbers and stuff. But sometimes he actually spoke on the phone, or he would put Gates McFadden. I actually heard Gates McFadden and LeVar Burton on the phone. So anyways, to make a long story short, this short story is probably one of the strongest pieces of circumstantial evidence that I have that Brent and Loree are not what they appear to be, and that I did and do have a legit relationship with the real Brent Spiner. At the time I made this short story, I did not realize that I didn't believe in clones. I didn't even know about clones. And I don't think Brent Spiner at this time knew about clones either. So all I can say is people think that, or I would say the Jesuits are claiming that the reason I stick with Brent is because I've got this obsession with famous men, and I just, I'm incapable of having a normal, healthy relationship with a normal person. So that's why I've got to have all these famous guys in my life. And that is just so untrue. It's just a Jesuit propaganda thing where they just want you to believe that, so you won't believe the truth that Zach Knight is the Antichrist and he's demon possessed. Actually, he's Satan incarnate almost. So this story really goes into my heart, who I was in the 1990s and why I fell so deeply in love with Brent Spiner. And when you hear the story, you're going to realize it wasn't because he was famous. And this story also captures Brent Spiner's heart in the 1990s. So I encourage people, even though it's a short piece, I spent 3 months writing this story, and I believe the Jesuits do not want the world to hear this. Probably more than any other piece of writing that I've done, this is the one that scares them the most, because in a court of law, I could use this as circumstantial evidence that Brent and I had a real relationship in the 1990s. And I wrote this in 2000, before Loree McBride claimed she married Brent Spiner. And it's about 90% true. Let me tell you what parts are not true. The parts that are not true is that I was not diagnosed positive for breast cancer. Okay? Jesus said, Gail, if you will write, he said, you do have breast cancer, but I will take it away if you write. So I wrote this short story, and Jesus kept his end of the deal, and he took away the breast cancer. He did tell me in prayer that I should not get any biopsies done because I couldn't trust the doctors, but apparently because my mother was worried and Brent was worried, I went ahead and got the biopsies done, and I got damaged in one of the biopsies. They when they cut into me to do the biopsy, the Jesuits contaminated me with some sort of drug, and I lost so much blood in that biopsy that I was bedridden for 3 weeks with severe anemia. They apparently put a blood thinner. They contaminated one of my prescription meds or something with a blood thinner so that when I went into the operation, I was bleeding profusely. In fact, the doctor says, I can't stop the bleeding. I don't know what's wrong. The Jesuits were trying to harm me using the biopsy. So I didn't listen to Jesus, though I did listen to him to write this story, but I didn't listen to him, and I got the biopsies done. And Jesus was telling me, Gail, I told you if you did what I said, I'd take the breast cancer away. Should have listened to me, then you wouldn't have had to go through all that anemia with that biopsy. So this is all I know is Jesus told me to write, and this was the first thing I wrote. I had given up on Silver Skies because I was disgusted. I wrote that for Brent Spiner to honor our love. And when I found out about Loree McBride in 1996, I said, forget it. I'm not writing for this guy anymore. I don't know what's going on with him or why. I couldn't understand why he would call me on the phone and have this woman in his life. And I knew he called me on the phone. And yet he couldn't give me up either. Now, this short story goes into all of that. This short story goes into I believe my performance, the way that I read Emerald Towers is this is my best narration yet. It's a combination of a brilliant short story with a brilliant performance. If you want to hear what Brent Spiner sounded like when he called me on the phone in 1991, you got to listen to this audiobook, okay? This is what he sounded like. This was the tone of voice. This was the yearning that I heard. I captured him brilliantly in the audiobook. In fact, I'm deliberately decided to publish Emerald Towers as a Kindle book so that I could make the audiobook. You guys, like I said, this is who I was in the 1990s. This story captures me, and it captures who Brent was. Now, right now, we discovered in 2011 that Brent Spiner has a clone. In fact, he has many clones. And the clone is a totally different man from the real Brent Spiner. The real Brent Spiner is a deep, sensitive, and awesome man. And I captured who he is in this story. So, I'm very proud of my narration of this and I'm very proud of this story. And I don't understand why it's not getting recognized, because I consider this, like I said, I spent three months working on this, full-time hours, for a little short story. I think it's my little masterpiece. And the narration for it is quite good too.